I've been trying to wrap my little pea brain around why I enjoy movies nowadays less than I used to, and for a while I thought it boiled down to modern movies just being worse than movies from 10 to 15 years ago. But the more I think about it, I'm realizing movies nowadays aren't really worse or better than movies back then, they're just less fun.
But we sang the fun song!
And to some of you, peak cinema may be fucking Thanos snapping away CGI Tom Holland, but for me it's when New Line Cinema decided that it was a great idea to send Jason Voorhees into space for no reason other than it's sick, or when Trimark Pictures decided it was a great idea to send the Leprechaun into space for no reason other than it's funny.
Mommy thicker than my eggnog on Christmas, ass bigger than fuck. Windows up, and does it fucking reek? Smell so bad, it's hard to...
So let's kind of break down what I mean when I say modern films are no fun, and I think a genre that historically has been the most fun is horror, so let's start there and take a look at the most popular horror movies in theaters in 2023. We have Thanksgiving, Evil Dead Rise, Late Night with the Devil, Saw X, The Nun 2, Knock at the Cabin, and I'll start by saying I'll probably never revisit a single one of these films ever again. They were obscenely mediocre. Honestly, I think the only horror movie I saw last year that I'm likely to watch again is one that went straight to streaming called Totally Killer, which is a pretty fun ode to 80s cinema about a girl who goes back in time to stop a serial killer from killing her mom in the future.
I'd like to report a crime that hasn't happened yet. Have you seen the movie Back to the Future?
Now let's look forward to 2024. We have Smile 2, Trap, Blink Twice, Long Legs, Acadian, The Front Room, Afraid, and Cuckoo. Now, as much as I love Nick Cage, each of these movies is as forgettable as the next. When I look back at modern times 10 years from now, genuinely the only two horror films from this year I'm going to remember will be The Substance and Terrifier 3. And do you know why that is? These films are really fucking fun. Are they perfect? Hell no. But you can genuinely see how much fun the creators had while they were making these films. The Terrifier pretty much has two things going for it: the gore effects and striking a nice balance of comedy in the most horrifying of situations. The Substance honestly could have been amazing, but for me it kinda overstayed its welcome a bit with its bloated and unnecessary ending. I genuinely think that movie could have gone up like 2 points if they just chopped the final 30 minutes off the film. But with that said, that's not how I'm gonna look back and remember the film in the long term. I'm gonna look back and remember how much fun I had watching the movie and experience the same joy on rewatch. And these two movies are a prime example of the big issue I have with the American studio system currently. The Terrifier 3 actually funded its budget of $2 million on a loan garnered from the funds of the second film's overwhelming success, effectively funding itself off of its predecessor. The Substance looks to have funded most of its $17 million budget through the UK-based streaming company Mubi, and the film is firmly a French film, untethered from the US studio system. Despite its use of American actors and scenery, it's actually filmed entirely in France. So my question is, why the fuck aren't big studios in the US throwing a couple table scraps to creators who want to make fun films? The audiences are showing up to theaters and literally showing them that this is what they want, but they keep filling our screens with the dog shit generic films I mentioned before, which leads me to my first point. As someone whose film taste was developed throughout the 90s and 2000s, I had this crazy idea in my head that studios would always be willing to take a few risks a year, because honestly they had up until about 15 years ago or so. We had wild films like The Matrix through Warner Brothers, and honestly some of the weirdest movies I've seen are actual studio-funded films. Naked Lunch, for example, distributed by 20th Century Fox. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was created through Universal. We had horror films, like I mentioned earlier, where they literally sent known slasher characters into the hood or into space, simply because some writer thought it would be a blast, and honestly it was. Those are some of the most memorable and rewatchable in those series for me. Obviously they won't always land, but when they do, they're unforgettable. And when we become too risk-averse, we lose out on so many possibly amazing films. I obviously don't think major studios should be dumping massive budgets into silly little movies like these, but imagine if Paramount gave $10 million to 17 creators with a wild idea to make films that were genuinely creative and interesting, instead of pumping $170 million into an absolutely atrocious Halo show. We definitely would have had some misses, but we would have had at least a few gems that stand the test of time instead of a CGI-ridden DOA nightmare that no one's gonna remember in 5 years. I also don't think every movie should be fun, but there needs to be a balance. For some contrast through time, in 1994 we had The Shawshank Redemption, but we also had Tammy the T-Rex. In 1996 we had Fargo, but we also had Mars Attacks. In 1999, we had The Matrix, but we also got graced with Idle Hands. In 2002, we had Adaptation, but we also had fucking Jason X. Now let's look forward to 2024. We have Challengers and nothing. Literally the only thing I can think of that's of any comparable level of fun to that of previous years is Steven Kostanski's hyper low budget film Frankie Frico, which is basically his take on like Gremlins 2/Ghoulies. It's an absolutely hilarious film, but it basically got no theatrical release, and I was lucky enough an Alamo near me had like a 2-day showing of it. And honestly, Kostanski is a prime example of the issue I'm highlighting here. His films are always fun. His previous film, Psycho Goreman, honestly might be my favorite movie of 2020. Yet this guy has to empty his couch cushions to scrape together $50K for his next film.
You will suffer an eternity for this!
Yet somehow still manages to have better practical effects in his silly puppet movie than most modern films do. Why isn't he attracting the attention of these major studios? Like fuck, studios could honestly throw 20 artists like him $1 million instead of making some absolutely generic brand goat piss like Smile 2 and save money. Now I won't act like there's no modern films with studio backing that I didn't have a bit of fun with. Obviously the Daniels movies like Swiss Army Man and Everything Everywhere All at Once were fun. And even some horror stuff like that silly Freaky Friday clone Freaky with Vince Vaughn, which is kind of an ode to those older, more silly movies that are long forgotten at this point in time.
When our beavers come to fight, feel our glory and our might. Yeah?
I understand studios being risk averse nowadays, but the fact is, movies like The Terrifier and Frankie Frico were out there being made on shoestring budgets, and it goes to show it really isn't that much of a risk to back some of these small creators. They just won't do it, and I don't understand why. Instead, they back uninspired, bland fucking horror films or throw $100 million+ at a Ryan Reynolds CGI fest year after year, and I'm fucking tired of it. I want to have some goddamn fun at the movies again. If there's one thing I think studios need to realize, it's that I don't care if a movie is good if I'm having fun. I'm 1,000 times more likely to rewatch Kung Pao on repeat than I am The Fucking Holdovers. And that goes for buying physical media too, or showing it to my friends. Sure, The Holdovers is a better movie and it got Oscars and shit, but it's no fun at all and it's a once is enough experience. Now this doesn't mean I either want a movie to be bad or Oscar bait, which is what they seem to understand that as, but a movie can prioritize being entertaining over pretty much everything else. In the end, I think the current state of film is just fairly disappointing, and it's not that we don't have great films coming out, because honestly there's probably more consistently excellent films nowadays than ever before, but there's just minimal enjoyment to be had anymore. It's rare a movie comes out that I feel is worth a second glance. With studios casually throwing around insane numbers like $250 million on a fucking J.K. Simmons Santa movie, I can't help but wonder what film would look like if they just fucking didn't on one of these fucking horrible ideas once a year, and instead funded a bunch of smaller, more fun or experimental ideas that are undoubtedly out there and waiting to be brought to life. It's just disappointing, and I know I'm gonna sound like an old fuck for this, but back in my day, they just randomly gave mutant turtles a flea market ass lamp and shot them back into feudal Japan. Back in my day, little kids went on dangerous ass quests to find pirate treasure and had a gadget Asian and maskless Leatherface with them. Back in my day, kids got to control weird living spacesuits that fed them gross food cubes, and then they got to take vengeance out on their bullies and then become friends in the process. Movies were fucking fun, regularly. Now it's near impossible to get these out there movies produced. I mean, just a quick example of this exact issue. Last year they did test screenings at festivals for the Macon Blair directed Toxic Avenger reboot, starring Peter Dinklage as the new Toxie. It looked very promising. I heard good things from fellow reviewers, and most importantly, it sounded super fun. But due to contracts with some of the actors, in order to be released it needs a theatrical run, and it's had a hard time finding distribution. And it honestly, from the sounds of it, might never find distribution. Studios have become so risk averse to fun that they won't take a chance on an already completed film with a great director and known actors. It honestly blows my mind. Well, that's pretty much all I got for you. Let me know down below what some of the most fun movies you've ever seen are, and if you've seen any fun ones recently. And also, I have a podcast that I do with a couple other YouTuber friends, and you should check it out because it's good. And bye.
Mommy thicker than my eggnog on Christmas. Ass bigger than fuck.